Thanks, Susan, and we'll introduce the team shortly. Just a very quick overview of where I'm coming from, and as Susan has said, I'm Exec Dean of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences at Ulster University, and as you'll have heard, creative industries is one of the key strategic priorities for Ulster as a university, which is really a significant piece. I've been involved for a number of years around course provision and research in the space of creative industries, and more recently I've been involved in co-leading the Future Screens Northern Ireland initiative, the Creative Cluster, which you've heard a lot about, I'm sure, in the last day and a half. So what we've heard over and over again is the idea of the shiny new facility, which we're talking about in terms of the Screen Media Innovation Lab. That's fine. We've already secured the funding for that. It's a £70+ million project that we're going to co-deliver with Belfast Harbour and NI Screen and Queen's and so on. That's one thing. But what the big industry players are saying is you can have all the effing shiny facilities in the world, but unless you've got the talent to deliver what we need in that facility and around that facility, we won't come. We won't use your space. So that's really the foundation, I think, of our conversations today. It's about that idea of place-based talent pipelines, and we've got this fantastic array of talent and experience and expertise here. So I might just introduce the panel then, and I'll start with you, Rachel.
Hello everyone, I'm Rachel Nicholson. I am Head of Institution at Backstage Academy. Backstage Academy is based on Production Park, which is in the Wakefield district in West Yorkshire. And Production Park is a live events campus. And so we have multiple companies who are part of the supply chain for the live events industry, who operate off campus, and Backstage Academy provides the educational and training aspect of that.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma Turner. I am Head of Film, CPD and Future Skills, not Future Skills. It's not my bad typing, I promise. So ScreenSkills, if you don't know, it is the industry-led UK skills body. So our job is to make sure that we are providing with funding, training to make sure that the UK is the best possible, has the best possible workforce. We're driven, though, completely and utterly by what industry say they need.
Fantastic. And over to you, Ros.
Hello, I'm Ros. I work as a producer for Punchdrunk. I started with them in 2017 in Shanghai, running Sleep No More. So I was in Shanghai for 3 years. And came back in 2019 to run the Audience of the Future project, working with the RSC and MLF Philharmonia as part of that consortium, which delivered the Dream Demonstrator, and we had our own series of work packages working in tech to figure out how that might inform the rest of our own future pipeline.
Dominic?
Thank you. Dominic Lusardi. I wear multiple hats, to be totally honest with you. I run my own immersive technology business for the last 15 years and been in the games and productions industry for all of that time as well. I recently stepped out and now advise organisations, councils, educational establishments on how to get best use of digital and how to diffuse what is a world of acronyms in a world where people are just referring to terminology in the world of digital without really understanding what the underlying skills and the underlying need is.
Fantastic, thank you. So I might start with you, Ros, because when we talk about place, like place for you is like, multiple place, and obviously you work at the core of the industry, and you and I have chatted about the kind of pipelines of talent that you need but that you've got this incredible model that you work with in whatever place you work. So maybe you want to chat to us about that.
A sure thing. Thank you. Yeah, we're definitely a location-based. You know, the way that we work is always it starts with a building, is the thing that we always say. And we're so beyond excited to finally have a premises in Woolwich Arsenal, where we're opening the Burnt City next year in March, April. And we were based in Tottenham before then. We were of that place, and we had a development centre there in the village. Now we come to Woolwich Arsenal, we open the show there. We really want to make sure that we're working with the Borough of Woolwich as well to engage local communities and get talent that we wouldn't otherwise encounter through the building. So we have, as part of our KPIs, 25 work placements that will come through. We've been talking with Uni of Greenwich and Uni of Ravensbourne, particularly on the design side at the moment, since everything's ramping up. The show's getting ready to open, and so we'll have 12 design interns who'll come through and work with our design department in a really kind of cross-pollination approach. You know, you don't know exactly what you're going to be designing any given day. It might be lush fabrics and textiles to, we quickly need to make 1,000 clocks, you know, like it's something that we hope those interns are going to come through and really understand it in a kind of non-linear way, that they've come out the other side having learned a fantastic amount about the immersive experiences that we build. I guess once the show opens, we'll get a great deal more footfall through the space, and we know that as placemakers, having worked in New York and Shanghai, that has an impact on the region that we're situated in. And I guess from my perspective of Audience of the Future, what I kind of hope for is that we keep working on some of the tech-driven explorations we've been making, and kind of work towards having an on-site labs or something where we can actually really open the doors for the first time. You know, we're quite a secretive company, but like actually invite people in and say, you know, let's find new ways of working together, because that's been my experience for the past couple of years, that by the benefit of Audience of the Future, we've really been able to find entirely different languages for working.
Yeah. Really key, I think, you know, over the past couple of days or day and a half, you know, this idea of language has come through over and over again. And your work, Rachel, with the Backstage Academy, this idea of terminology, I mean, how do we refer to people, young people, for instance, who are coming through your ranks? Is it this idea of is it an internship? Is it an apprenticeship? And again, it's a problem, I think, that we haven't really got to grips with in the creative sector, because it's just this mush of terminology and description. So maybe you could talk to us about how you address that.
So as an institution, we are so we have come from industry, and we're an industry-led institution, and so we had our new intake of students on the 4th of October, and I stood up to welcome them all to the institution. I said, this is the first day of your professional career. You get 3 years worth of support and mentoring at the start of your career, but you're all now professionals. You become professionals from day one, and we help and we guide you, and we support you, and we connect you. We introduce you to broader areas of the industry, as well as the on-site companies and partners, but you're professional from now, not something that happens in 3 years. And I think if you articulate that to the students, they start to think about themselves in that way, and they start to think about themselves in an entrepreneurial way. And also, if you then reiterate that to industry partners and to fellow collaborators, then they start to see students in a different way. I think I'd really like to encourage people to think of early career professionals rather than students and students on work placements, which for me makes me think of when I was 15 and, going and doing my 2-week work placements at secondary school. That's not what we're looking at the moment. We're looking at talent pipelines, we're looking at enabling people, and we're looking at introducing people to the diverse range of different pathways and departure points for people within this industry. I think, I think it's a very valid point that actually we're preparing people for roles and opportunities that haven't been defined yet that they themselves will define, or maybe not. They might not define it. So, you know, yesterday evening I was on a fantastic table of people, and the first question I said to everybody was what do you do, rather than what are you doing now? And I think that we'll be seeing a lot more of a shift to what are people doing now in the future, because I think the future is about teaching yourself, having a lifelong learning path in all aspects, and redeveloping yourself. So really what we're trying to teach people is to become autodidacts, people who can teach themselves and to come back and can share with other people to have long-lasting careers and to take the industry forwards.
Fantastic. And I think there's a key question here around where the pool comes from. And do you want to talk a wee bit more about
we're a little bit
student...
unusual, and I think I'd like to sort of present us as a bit of a provocation.
Good.
So I would like to challenge the notion that these sorts of learning establishments need to exist in a city. We exist in a recovering mining community just south of Wakefield, and we exist there because that's where the rehearsal studios, the original rehearsal studios, the first ones in Europe for the live events industry, were created, and bands would come in and all of the carefully trained local staff would then go off on tour for 2 years with Coleman. And so they realised that they actually couldn't find the staff that they needed. And that was where Backstage Academy was born. But one of the things that I think is really important as the provocation is we've heard a lot about diversity and about getting people into the industry who might not normally find their way here. And one of the things that we can do to achieve that is to go to where they are.
Yeah.
Not to wait for them to come to us. So the area that we're in, 45% of our students are from Yorkshire, 28% of our students are from the Wakefield region, and that's an area of low level of socio-economic activity and a low level of of young people who would actually go into higher education, certainly come into, who wouldn't normally find their way onto a live events tour, or working in some of the broad and diverse areas of the live events industry. And so we make the place, and you get to a critical mass, which we've now, after about 11 years of being in existence, we're now at a critical mass where the campus, the site, the ecosystem, which is what we're trying to create on Production Park, has got to a stage where now international companies are coming to place themselves at Production Park, and one of the key attractions is Backstage Academy and access to the talent pipeline. We're just working with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to develop a 100-acre site to further expand the site and have more studios and to invite more collaborators onto that site, because we're trying to make a place, and we're trying to make a place where normally people wouldn't expect a place to be, and I think that's really exciting.
Absolutely, and that's great. And that parallel with what you're talking about, Ros, moving around, you make the place, and I think that's a really key concept. Before I come to you, because you've got this sort of overarching umbrella piece, I'll just come to Dominic in terms of, because you and I spoke about the relevance of the place in which you work. So do you maybe want to talk and pick some of those threads up?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with Rosalind and Rachel anymore. I built the organisation in Middlesbrough, not a place that is very challenged in many different ways. But we had a Teesside University around about 20 years ago to put a lot of investment into what was classed visualisation. It didn't try to specify it to be games or computer animation or anything else. It was an up-and-coming concept that not many people understood. But what they did is that they actually gave an opportunity for people to have more of a generic skill set in and around storytelling, production, and then you specialised in the industry of where you wanted to go. So really what was fueling the development and the education back then was either pre-rendered material or real-time material. And that's where our specialities came from. After that, what you ended up finding is that, even myself, came out of university and kind of, well, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with these skills, but I know I can apply them in various places. So there was an opportunity then, what is now being defined as Create Tech, and it's really good that
Yep.
we're beginning to find a terminology for that we've seen quite a lot of companies generated in the Northeast around Create Tech. We've got quite a lot of games companies in there. We've got my own company, Animation, that's an immersive technologies company. What that started out being really was specializing in real-time technologies and allowing people to find their own career path in there and start to define it themselves. And it's, hearing that the definition of the future careers is only illy defined at the moment is great to me, because I can now tell my parents that this is why I've not been able to explain to them what I do for a living. But just creating those opportunities and allowing the organizations themselves to feel their way into it, but within an environment that wasn't necessarily a traditional environment, but actually had some links into traditional industry. So we started to build businesses out of new technology, but very much rooted in traditional industries and traditional locations, but reassessing what the opportunities were for people that were coming out of the local pipeline and local education.
Fantastic, and obviously, Emma, in your role, you've got to try and sort of pull these separate living components together in a particular way. And you and I have chatted about the idea of, and virtual production is a key example because it's such a new space. How do you standardize? Should we standardize? And obviously in that whole sort of education and skills development piece, one of your roles is to standardize, even though I know you're not a fan of that. So maybe you could talk us some of that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, standards are the way forward to democratize everything. And when I think it was about a year ago, ScreenSkills was sort of appointed to pull together standards, and I'll use virtual production as an example because Frank said, although obviously there are many, many other skills areas that need our attention. We set down the road of almost looking, could we follow a national occupational standards route when we were looking at the huge variety of that virtual production impacts on people's jobs. And I was very sort of up for all this, and we sat down and we sort of drew endless matrices and argued about what virtual production was, which we can still all carry on arguing about it. And we managed to, and we have managed, and we are just finishing off the process of looking at how virtual production will impact the visual effects departments, the lighting departments, and the camera departments. And that was fairly successful, and we've worked with steering groups and working groups to enable us to now go, okay, as a matte painter, how will your job be affected when we go into the virtual production pipeline, and where will you now be working at what stage? We then tried to look at the jobs such as production, first ADs, line producers, directors, writers, art department, production designers, and it became really clear that there were about 3 people in the country that knew what impacts would be made using virtual production, and all of them were doing about 6 jobs at once. So what I moved into is, and it's great because it hits the place thing, is that I decided that what we should do is have 6 months of eye-opening. So what we're doing, and this is not particular plug, but I just think it's great for everybody to know about it, is between now and Christmas there will be webinars running from everything from a beginner's guide to virtual production right through to a fantastic case study. They will all be from people from the UK, because much as I love The Mandalorian, I think sometimes that's a barrier to us believing that we can do this stuff. And the other thing we're doing, which Frank and I talked about, and if you go on the website, ScreenSkills website tomorrow, you'll be able to see the first of these and book yourselves on it, is we're asking studios that have virtual production tech, not necessarily the big stuff, but some sort of tech, to open their doors and let people come and see, come to the place. Backstage are joining with us with, if that's all right to
Explore,
say,
yeah,
with
go for it,
Explore. Sorry, Jim, if I've overjumped that. But, and lots of other nations and regions facilities, either their pop-up facilities or they're some of the incredibly big and expensive volumes that we're hearing every day are being built. And so I suppose, you know, the challenge for ScreenSkills for us, as Frank said, and has been said over and over again, we've got these amazing facilities building up in all over the UK. We're an amazing workforce. What do I do to either upskill people in their jobs or share skill? I'm going off the phrase transferers because I don't think it's we aren't going to be poaching people from other industries, from stage industry, from games. I'm hoping that people will converge and be able to move from one, you know, that's my dream. I came from theatre and I moved very seamlessly, and for a few years I was able to work between theatre and being a TV producer. And I really hope there's going to be people in our workforce, LED engineers, brain bar experts who will be able to go on Coldplay's tour and work in the big volumes and work in big theatre pieces and go and write a game because they want a couple of years off to do that.
Fantastic. And again, those subtleties of language and terminology you've just alluded to are critical when we're trying to make the case to government, whether it's regional or, you know, we've got to have that joined up message that we're all speaking the same language.
And I mean, I think the thing that I've discovered on this journey, I mean, a year and a half ago, I was an exec producer for HBO Europe, and I came to ScreenSkills. I've had the most fantastic journey, but when I started doing the virtual production part of my job, the future skills, the level of collaboration is incredible. And the session before this morning, talking about putting Smil together, I can only begin to imagine, because everybody I talk to, and I've put these seminars, webinars together, when I've been talking to people like Rachel, when I've been talking to people all over the UK, they all want to upskill the workforce to be able to work in our fantastic industry. But it's a real old challenge, and it's getting the parents to say, oh, my daughter spends all their time, you know, on games engines. Yes. Keep going. You know, so, and that's the challenge, and getting out to the schools and saying that, and getting, you know, amazing courses like is happening, obviously, at Ulster to feed this pipeline out.
Mm-hmm. Now, really fantastic, and it's this piece again, you know, I almost feel like an outsider here as a university academic, but also I know that Queen's University and Ulster University are absolutely committed to that idea of being responsive to what's required. So I suppose, like, a question I'll pose to all of you is, can we do it? Because that's the key question, you know, and we've got people like Mark Lever in the room, I think, you know, from DIT and so on. It's like we're making these promises essentially to some of the biggest players on the planet. Yeah, okay, you come here, we can do it, but can we do it, and how will we do it? Where are you first?
I mean, I think you've said it already. It's dialogue, and it's a constant dialogue, and it's not thinking that we have done it. It is an ongoing process, and if we can ensure that actually we've got a really good quality of dialogue across the sectors, then yes, absolutely, you can do it. Because who else is going to do it? You know, we're the change makers. We're the ones that are going to be able to drive this. So this is where it's going to come from. So we have to, you have to meet that challenge. But in meeting that challenge, we also need to reflect the need, the responsibility that we have, that we don't just say one thing. I think it would be very easy for, at the moment, a lot of the conversation is around virtual production and VR, AR, new technologies. However, we need to make sure that when we're making representations, both at a political level and at a regional level, that actually we're also bringing up, as I think was mentioned on the previous panel, you also need your staging companies, you also need your craft skills, because actually it's about how we all collaborate together and how we grow as a team. So we have a responsibility to make sure that we're not focusing on one area, which is new and exciting and shiny, we're actually looking at the entire sector.
Fantastic. Dominic.
Yeah, again, couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the way we've seen, or certainly the way I've seen it develop, is we've become very nuanced in the way of games development, games level design, character animation. I think there's a need to kind of step back a level actually and go back to more of the genesis of where we're coming from. We are talking predominantly across all of that as real-time developers, real-time developers that fit within a pipeline, and starting to improve the way in which we describe that. For me, I personally, even though I work in VR and AR, I always see them as they're a delivery mechanism. They're not the career. You know, they're literally, you know, if you speak to an AR developer, they all say, well, I'm a Unity developer or I'm an Unreal developer. That applies my content in augmented reality. So I think it's about changing a little bit of the narrative to, rather than just be about the final deliverable or what is the sexy title that's going to get the most attention, to actually starting to improve the knowledge of what's needed to fill that pipeline. It's, you know, for so long it's been everybody's avoided the word real time for years. They talk about it in games design or games engines, and for me, I think it's about taking it back to a little bit more of the genesis of the idea and going, well, what is the problem we're trying to achieve here? We're trying to achieve people in the production pipeline. We're looking for developers that sit within certain criteria of that, but this is the skill set you need, and this is how you specialize in what you're doing. You know, I'm a good governor at a couple of schools, and unfortunately, it's starting there. You know, the art and design section of it is left till the end of the week and is kind of not really considered as being the most important part of what they're doing. Yet in geography and yet in history, they're doing drawings, they're talking about maps. It's trying to start to change the language that it's not an industry that you go to and you're going to struggle with. It actually is where you've got growth, and it's a constant learning journey and innovation, getting comfortable with the fact that challenge is a good thing rather than a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, that concept of connecting the dots, I think, is so critical, and again, it's something I think as a sector that we're still in a learning process. Ros, I know your own experience and the kind of work that you've done, back to what Dominic has referred to, this idea of there's a place for absolutely everything, and even single people can do quite a lot of that multitasking piece. So,
yeah, thanks. We did exactly that. We sort of started with ourselves when we found ourselves coming into COVID, where we were about to do a play test in some most basic building blocks of something, and then of course it went on hold, and then we were like in the hinterland, all kind of siloed off and quiet. And so my colleague Joel and I started watching Harvard CS50 introduction to computing courses on YouTube. There's YouTubes for everything. Like, we felt so wide-eyed and kind of keen to learn about like the coding languages and programming skills that we were hearing about in collaboration, and actually be able to speak some of that language ourselves. I guess like I'd heard a lot about, you know, creative technologists acting as translators, and I really hooked onto it because my degree was in translation and linguistics. I thought, okay, that's super cool. Maybe I need one of those. But then I think, you know, the opportunity to actually learn the rudimentary vocabulary yourself and then lean in and have a go just means that then you have, what we found we had was practitioners with decades of experience in immersive productions, finding new abstractions and new applications of technology that's been existing for years and years. Everyone's probably quite bored of it at this stage, you know, like it feels quite not quite, and it's not in the, we weren't working in VR and AR, and so we were kind of tinkering behind the scenes in like the back end of making a program, and that was wonderful to understand that actually we've got exactly the same problem-solving languages there already, you know, like theatre makers are constantly going, if this, then that, if this, then that, and that we could apply all of that in a completely logistical coding language. So learning bits of Python or bits of JavaScript and kind of going, okay, this isn't a closed door, and once I have these tools, I can use it the same way as I learned Excel, or the same way as a lighting designer has kind of picked up that, you know. So I think the way we want to develop our next places are with time to think, like contemplative space in that area, because it's in those moments that you can kind of truly surprise yourself of what you're capable of.
Fantastic. And Emma, again, back to you, this idea of like the responsibility that you have in your role to kind of connect the dots that, that you're hearing about here. So can we do it?
Yeah, well, I suppose the thing I've learnt is about being agile, and us as nations to somehow be able to, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about, you know, the formality of apprenticeships, the formality of undergraduate degrees. And one of the things I heard when we were talking to another sector, not the creative sector, about how to upskill when something very new comes along, I think it was cars and planes and everything that electrics is going to do, is this idea of modules, this idea that you, as an undergraduate, you do a module, and actually as a professional who's been in the industry for 15 years comes in and also does that module, because actually they're both at that moment in time upskilling at that moment in time. And I think right now we've got to be so agile. We've got to think really differently. I suppose just going back to my thing of going, why on earth are we trying to create standards in this world when there's only 3 people that know how to do it anyway? Shouldn't we just be all talking, all upskilling? And Alex Hope, who's inspirational to me, he's on our on the board of ScreenSkills. He just said, Emma, your job is to pull together the common threads. And I think that's all I think about remembering. So if I talk, and that's what I do most of my week now, is talk, and this is a great 3 days to do more talking. If I hear the same thing popping up and up again, I'll go, right, we need to sort that. But yeah, it's quite scary sometimes. But yeah, I just think if I can keep reacting to the here and now and making sure it's just, you know, there's enough voices saying that to me from industry, from the educational establishments, and actually, unusually, I think certainly for ScreenSkills, who try to be very agnostic in all things, we're being driven quite a lot by product owners at the moment, and that's quite an interesting space to be, is that you'll get that mocap system maker and that mocap system maker, and they're delivering training to a certain extent and themselves to work their bit of kit, but actually, or that real-time engine or that real-time engine, and actually I also have to keep my eyes open to make sure that we're not jumping into bed too much with one particular product. And that's an unusual, I've never come across it before. And that's what virtual production has sort of thrown at us, is that the hardware and the software manufacturers are running so fast that there's very little commonality at the moment sometimes.
Absolutely key. And you've touched on it, the importance of constant communication, constant conversation. And I know, like, the kind of work that I've done over the past number of years with colleagues in Future Screens in particular, and in industry, it's a lot of time that needs to be paid for, essentially, as well. You know, you've got a role, and so that's where the funding is, and the financial support.
And one of the things we're just doing is, and it's brilliant, is we've now got, in ScreenSkills, we've got people who are sat now in the regions. There's someone coming here, there's someone in Scotland, somebody in Wales, and obviously we've got a presence across England. But that's, again, back to place. That's fundamental for us. We need to keep our eyes and ears open and on the ground, working with all the regional areas. So that our new kind of managers are just taking up their positions was really exciting. As you say, communicate.
fantastic. And I know we're supposed to devote like 10 minutes to questions, but I've only like got one here. So, you know, keep them coming through. I just maybe ask one that's slightly related to what we've been talking about, but it'd be good to just have your thoughts on it. How can we ensure that the new heavy industries aren't as exploitative and wasteful as the old ones? Dominic, no pressure.
That's a tough question. It's a tough question. Hard to answer. I mean, it comes based on a skill. I think valuing the skill and understanding how transferable those skills are as well, that they're not... Was it fair to say that in previous traditional industries that you could find yourself in a bit of a cul-de-sac as far as your industry is, if it's a physical hand skill? This is why I always try to say to anybody, if we're looking for real-time developers or we're looking for animators, we're looking for people who've got kind of a generic skill set and will apply it in the way that we do it. When we started 15 years ago, we were an animation company, and that was an easy way to explain to what we did. We would now describe ourselves as an immersive technology company. It's where we were always going to be, but what we would say to our talent that we had in-house was we're kind of R&D in disguise. The way in which we're trying to do it is come on the journey with us, and we will help improve your skills and make sure that they're relevant in the modern day. We're not going to just completely sweat out all the skills that you've got here, and once we're done, we'll move on to the next thing. Is actually, no, we're going on a journey. Technology is a delivery mechanism for you. However, we're going to constantly improve those skills. And I think separating then the technology from the skill is all of a sudden a better way to kind of not take people back down that cul-de-sac.
Rachel, your thoughts?
I think, and I would say this, I think there's part of it which is about education. One of the things that I quite enjoy is the challenge that we get from our students, who are much from a sustainability point of view in terms of their practices, who are much better advocates for it than my generation, who challenge us, who challenge the way that we think, who challenge the practices that we're teaching, who ask difficult questions that we then have to work out the answers for. And I think it is about making it part of the conversation. I'm part of SIPA, which is the Sustainability in Production Alliance, which sort of features around sort of the live events and theatre side point of view. And we very much look at what the film and TV production guys are doing with Albert, and that's inspiring. And there's a lot that we can share and we can learn from each other in how we do that. And so, as part of SIPA, we're creating, student-led champions within different institutions to create a network of people who have a shared interest to develop, the sustainability practitioners of the future. We're also trying to provoke the conversation with people by running through Explore, which Emma mentioned, which is our research and development wing of Backstage Academy. We've also run several events, and we've also done training courses in and around sustainability within production. And really, it's about always asking that question and having that dialogue. And we might not like what the answer is, but we shouldn't be afraid of it, and we should hold our hands up to it and go, right, what can we do better?
Fantastic. And Ros, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I just agree with all of that.
Yeah.
And what's been said about being constantly learning, I think is so huge, especially since perhaps one of the reasons why it's been so possible to be so exploitative in previous incarnations of these industries is that, valuing ourselves and kind of speaking up for oneself, or kind of self-development, working on that. Like, once you kind of have some time to focus, there's some activity, you're putting good stuff in, you're learning new things, you kind of discover that the stuff that you can do actually has some value also. You have something meaningful to give to the conversation. I think that we as theatre makers particularly, can often think that like the, soft magic or artistry or something doesn't have as much, vocabulary of kind of, buzzwords or kind of agile kind of sense to it. But actually, if you come and talk to us about user experience, we can tell you some things. And the more that you learn and the more that you're kind of putting in, the more you have to say. And I think, hugely where we're kind of thinking about how to be more sustainable and just be kind of more grown up about everything. That's entirely necessary, since we'll speak up for ourselves more if that investment's there.
Yeah, and absolutely. And what I'm hearing here is that we're willing to take some responsibility to ensure that whatever talent comes through our pipelines, that we're pointing them in the right directions, and we're embedding the correct values, the values that mean a lot to us. So, and again, Emma, you've got like this responsible role around this. So you want to just...
Yeah, I mean, the question, I wasn't sure if it was talking so much about, the physical wastefulness or wasting people, really. But I think there's an upside in the new technological world. There's an upside and a downside. The upside is one of the people mentioned on a panel earlier, they can't hire fast enough. So that there's a certain power for the workforce in that. The downside, which we're seeing all the time, is people being forced into a position too early and crashing and burning. And so there's a huge amount of work, and hopefully we do our bit. We've got, if anybody's interested, in some fantastic e-learning modules that are applicable to the live events as well, in the cinema world, of around bullying and harassment, about about general wellness. And I personally commission a lot of trainers to provide those sort of wellness type training. I think, harking back to good old virtual production, I am waiting, and there's some work being done in Canada, and I'm sort of waiting and seeing, and I know there's a couple of virtual production studios in the UK who are looking at whether a whacking great, very expensive VP setup is any better or worse than flying people to Morocco and chucking water bottles around the place and flying the director back because they, something else happened, and then flying them out again. I mean, one would think it must be more sustainable to work where you can. And not everything's going to work for virtual production at all, but where you can to do it. And also, let's face it, you then have the assets you can use over and over again. And again, I would hope, though, exploitation around assets, there's an awful lot of legal work that needs to be done, but there should be a certain ownership around those assets, and therefore that level of exploitation and people packaging their assets and then being able to sell them on in a way that's of value to them. I can only imagine it's a better world. As long as, I say, we look after our people and we make sure they're not thrown, because the workforce is so not depleted, quite the opposite, it's growing, the need is growing so fast, it's that people aren't pushed into a position above what they're capable of, which we're seeing, unfortunately, quite a lot.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I mean, so much food for thought there, and I'm just looking at our little timer. We have 59 seconds to go for the rest of the panel. So, I mean, maybe if I could
Is it a bit of jazz you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, we improvise. We improvise. Yeah, we often run over. So this idea again, the title of the panel, the idea of place-based talent pipelines. I think we've touched on multiple concepts of place that I think are really, really vital and equally relevant. I think that's really key. But I think we've also touched on this idea, which is massively important, of sustainability, to use a buzz term, and then the inclusion piece. I think we've got to. And what I'm trying to do is just pick up on some of the key elements of conversations that we've all been involved with for the past day and a half, and the conversation that we've had in this panel. So much food for thought, and the key answer is yes, we can do it, but there are particular ways we've got to go about it. So
yeah, I think I would just, here is a perfect example: creating the opportunity. You create the opportunity, you create believability, and you create a dialogue that people can actually buy into. Without that opportunity, it's just buzzwords. And I think that's one of the key differences in where we're going at the moment.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thanks to our panellists. I think Susan's waiting in the wings to come back on. So.
I am indeed. Thank you very much indeed to each indeed of the panellists and to our esteemed chair as well. Can I ask you all to put your hands together for the panel, please, and thank you.